A quick look at the NASDAQ 100 Technology Security Index, and it's easy to tell that tech stocks have not been doing so hot in the last couple of years. And for those of you wondering, the NASDAQ 100 is made up of, you guessed it, 101 equity securities issued by companies listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And frankly, I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere about how a company whose job it is to track numbers very, very accurately was unable to count to 100 properly, but we're just going to move on. And as with any drop in profits, there come layoffs. And as with all layoffs come a string of people on Twitter demanding to know why, instead of laying off employees, companies didn't just pay their CEOs less. And possibly for the first time in history, tweeting appears to have accomplished something, as CEOs like Tim Cook from Apple, Eric Yuan from Zoom, and David Solomon from Goldman Sachs have taken significant pay cuts in 2022 and 2023. And before we cheer and clap and say we managed to do something, Tim Cook is still slated to take home $49 million. David Solomon is still expected to take home around $25 million. And only Eric Yuan from Zoom is taking any kind of a meaningful hit to his income, as he will only be taking about $10,000 home in 2023 and foregoing the entirety of his corporate bonus. This means those millions of dollars in free stocks that most CEOs get, he will not be getting. As for why companies are cutting their CEO salaries, there are two main reasons. First is just generally that tech company revenues are going down, and the second is public perception. During the pandemic, basically every tech company ever experienced a huge boom as people were forced to stay inside. And so every tech CEO ever said, good thing this gold rush will never end, and started hiring like crazy to keep their stocks up and make their investors happy. Then after the gold rush promptly ended, every CEO said, oh god, I can't believe the gold rush ended, and started firing like crazy to keep their stocks up and make their investors happy. Now when you make layoffs in the tens of thousands, you also make headlines. And when you make headlines, you make a lot of people angry. And when you make a lot of people angry, your stocks take a hit, and this is a bad thing. It's not a bad thing because people are angry. Frankly, companies couldn't care less about if people are angry. It's a bad thing because it causes their revenues and stocks to go down, and companies literally could not care more about that. So with stocks going down and revenues going down, boards and executives knew that they had to make changes. And so in addition to the layoffs that were already happening, they started cutting CEO salary. When you cut CEO salary, you get all the benefits of saving money without most of the issues of laying off employees. And this is because the number of employees you have hasn't actually changed. If you just cut a CEO salary, the amount of money you're saving often changes in the millions and possibly the tens of millions, and all the work that needs to get done still gets done. Now, thanks to the amount of competition that exists in the market, almost every product that there is has a substitute, and that makes it really easy to jump from one company to another if you have a negative perception of that company. Maybe I decide that Microsoft sucks, so I stop using Microsoft Word and start using the very comparable Google Docs. That is until I figure out that Google also sucks, and so I jump to Apache OpenOffice, which I'm sure also has a CEO that sucks, I just haven't learned about it yet. If you don't like Walmart, you can switch to Aldi. If you don't like Samsung, you can switch to Pixel, and so on and so forth for most things in your life. Thanks to there being multiple of everything, we can afford to be picky about the things we choose to consume, and companies know this, so they can kill two birds with one stone by cutting CEO pay, both because of the pay cut itself and also because they can tout the pay cut and build positive consumer perception. It's basically a win-win situation where the CEO takes a cut now in order to increase profits and increase popularity of the company, and then in 3 to 5 years time, when all of this has worked out really well and the company's making more money, the CEO can increase his salary again and take home even more money in stock options that he's offered annually. And while there's some people like Nell Minow, the vice chair of Value Edge Advisors, who seem to think that it's a show of solidarity when CEOs, quote, share the pain of pay cuts, personally, it's hard to find solidarity with someone who makes more in a year than I probably could take home in 10 or 12 lifetimes. However, as with anything that exists, there are people who disagree with it. Critics of this move say that you shouldn't cut CEO's salary because it risks the CEO leaving for a different company, and probably the CEO's salary is too small relative to the total payroll of the company, such that cutting it really doesn't mean much. After all, let's say you were to cut a CEO's salary from $20 million down to $10 million, but then as a result the CEO decides that a measly $10 million is not nearly enough to buy his third super yacht, so he goes to a different company making $18 million. Now, not only is your company already failing, but also investor perception is terrible because amid dropping revenues, the CEO has jumped ship for another company. The result of all of that happening is probably your stock price going down, which is specifically what you were trying to avoid in the first place. Critics also argue that while CEO compensation can be large, it's still minuscule compared to the total payroll of the company. Let's say you have a company with 5,000 employees. If each employee makes an average of $80,000 a year, that's around $400 million in payroll. Going from about $400 million in payroll to about $390 million in payroll is not nearly enough, since that's only a decrease of 2.5%. But whichever side of this argument you land on, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And before you go, if you like this video, you'll probably like that one, and I'll see you next time.